And for us, it will create a whole lot of problems if we decide to do voter registration first before coming back to do boundary limitation. Because from what we're hearing from the Electoral Commission, after the voter registration, voters will have known where they should go and vote during elections. And when you do boundary limitation after this exercise, there is bound to be a whole lot of problems because people must have been, relocated to somewhere else to vote because the boundaries will definitely change.
Wake Up Sierra Leone on AYV television. Don't forget you can always be a part of this program by moving over to our Facebook page. You find us at AYV Sierra Leone. Send your comments and questions to our Facebook page.
All right, in the show this morning, we've been joined in the studio by the National Publicity Secretary of the Sierra Leone People's Party, retired Lieutenant Lahai Lawrence. Leema, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Samuel, and thank you for having me.
All right, and in our studio too, we have Saliu. Saliu is the Saliu Kamara. Saliu is the mouthpiece of the National Elections Watch News. Saliu, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
All right, and these gentlemen are here this morning because we have two by-elections coming up in Kainlao District and Putloko District, but also there is a concern raised by the Opposition All People's Congress Party that the Electoral Commission Sierra Leone is in connivance with the ruling SLPP to implement boundary delimitation in favor of the ruling party. So, but let's start off with you, Leema, whilst we await the arrival of Sidi Tunis, the acting National Publicity Secretary of the opposition APC. There is this concern from the APC that your party in governance now is trying to ensure that you have an edge over them with the boundary delimitation, especially when the Electoral Commission has put out dates for registration, centers, and all of that. And now the Commission came out and said they are in place, willing and ready to go with, if at all, the data that comes from Statistics Sierra Leone would speak to boundary delimitation. First off, what does the SLPP make of that as a party?
Well, in the first place, in as much as it's legal and it's within the constitutional remit of the country, we support it because we believe democracy and the rule of law work side by side. And there's no way you can talk about democracy without talking about the rule of law. What we cannot support is what is any venture that is outside the framework of the law. That is what we will not support. And I would say this to the APC in the form of advice. I think 21st century politics is quite different from politics in the 60s and 70s. It's better for them to really grow and begin to really transform themselves, to posture themselves as a party that is fit for democratic governance. This issue of propaganda, misinformation to the public in order to really be at the sympathy of the public or to make other institutions look bad will really not put APC forward and will not make them a competing institutions when you think of democratic dispensation. What they are crying of now is something they did in 2017, and not because they did it, we are doing it, or this administration is actually endorsing it. They did it because it's within the framework of this constitution, section 38(1)(4), or even the subsidiary sections of that particular provisions of this constitution. It requires that, firstly, depending on the number of seats Parliament will really create based on the population distribution or the census that will be conducted, based on what they will submit to Parliament. It's basically what the House of Parliament will have to look into and see how many seats they require based on how the population in the country are distributed. And upon that, NEC would certainly have to conduct the boundary delimitation and also distribute populations according to that. And every constituencies have to be filled by a member of Parliament. And section 38(4) is saying that a boundary delimitation should be conducted at an interval of not less than 5 years and not more than 7 years. They did that in 2017. They conducted census, and consistent with this constitution, they conducted census. They delimited boundaries and also created districts and all. And I'll tell you, the Constitution, or the framers of the Constitution, were clear in their minds that in 5 years interval, of course, the population will grow, the population will decrease, the population will be shifted, and so you have to create balance in order to be able to dispense the national resources accordingly, and also undertake development programs according to the population.
As you talk about the 2017 boundary delimitation that was done by the APC, many political pundits frowned at that decision, looking at the timing. Though you're saying it's within the confines of the law, of course, it was constitutionally provided for. But many, and of course, including the SLPP party members, some of them were questioning the timing and where the boundaries were delimited. For example, the north, you have, new districts that came up and more constituencies created in the north, perceived to be the stronghold of the APC. So for many opposition political parties at the time, it was giving advantage to the ruling party and see what was going to come up. So is it the same situation as at now? Yes, you're saying it's legally provided for, but are we going to see 2017 repeated in 2022 just for the 2023 elections?
The problem with the APC, honestly, I must have to say this, they are dishonest. You understand? First of all, when they did census, they skewed the population of this country to areas that are sparsely populated. And when the NCRA conducted the population counts of this country under their own administration, of course, we saw where the actual population was. And so in terms of development programs as well, allocation of government resources also was skewed, you understand? And so they are very much aware of what they did, and they know for certain that when state institutions undertake activities of this nature, is really going to correct the fictitious data or the wrong data, and to give us a credible data, and they are aware of that, and they know this is going to expose them. That is why they have started actually crying foul to misinform the public and to make state institutions look bad, and this is bad for democratic institutions that want to compete for state governance.
All right. Let's quickly welcome Sidi Tunis, the Acting National Publicity Secretary of the Oppositional People's Congress. Good morning and welcome to the show, Sidi.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You've raised concerns, following the pronouncement of the Electoral Commission, Sierra Leone, that they are in place, ready and willing, if at all there are necessities for boundary delimitation, and you feel that the Electoral Commission should not have made a statement, especially when announcement for voters registration centers and all of these things have been announced by the Commission. But if we're to go by why you're crying, according to what the mouthpiece of the SLPP has just submitted, it's as a result of what you benefited in 2018. You created districts in your strongholds. You created more constituencies in your stronghold. But yes, it was constitutionally provided for, but now you feel the SLPP is doing the same, wanting to take that advantage, and the Electoral Commission is in support of that move.
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel. In the first place, let me build the premise before I respond to just what Leema mentioned closing his opening. You can remember that when the whole issue of midterm census started, we raised concerns as to the legitimacy of the midterm census itself. Taking into consideration constitutional provisions as far as it relates to censuses and when and how they should be conducted. So we raised concerns from the onset. And also we raised concern as far as it relates to the motive of the midterm census itself. We knew from the beginning that it had nothing to do with development as claimed by the government, because at that time we already had the midterm development plan in place, something that they brought, costed at 7 billion. That was to take us into 2023. So what was the need for, a census? And also, we know that censuses are conducted not specifically for electoral purposes, but for development purposes. And our focus then was, one, the constitutional matter, two, even the manner in which the pronouncement was made went against the provisions of our laws. The manner in which it was tabled in Parliament, we all saw the chaos. And at the end of the day, we, said, let us look at the whole process itself. And we found out so many technical and procedural deficiencies and inadequacies that we raised repeatedly, but that were ignored, to the point that in the end, some of our development partners agreed with us, including at that time the highest funder of the census process itself, the World Bank. They withdrew because of the technical inadequacies and deficiencies. So from then on, we knew that whatever data that may come out of this particular so-called midterm census, which is no longer midterm, by the way, will not be credible because of all of these challenges that we have faced going into the process itself. To this date, we still have those challenges facing us. So for us, we looked at the pronouncement of the Chief Electoral Commissioner as, not only unfortunate, but very suspicious. For the mere fact that if you look at the NEC strategic plan itself, they had already developed their strategic plan, wherein they put boundary delimitation for 2024. And for the simple reason that, yes, we have done boundary delimitation before, and there are constitutional provisions that says you can deal with the upper limit or the lower limit. And we have never done a boundary delimitation based on the lower limit provisions of the Constitution. The past ones that have been done, it has always been on the upper limit. And which is why when NEC put it for 2024, we were not surprised. Now, here we are. NEC has already done their mapping for registration, wherein they have informed us already, political parties, that we have increased centers by 10% to ensure that we reduce the difficulties people go through during election process. So now we'll have from 3,300 centers to about 3,630 centers. You've given us all of this information. You've given us the date for registration. You've given us the dates, for elections. And we are just a bit over a year away. And you're telling us, oh, if government decides to do boundary delimitation, we'll be ready. You don't propose. How would we be ready? Do you know where the delimitation will happen? You're telling us even for the registration, you have to do it in 2 phases. Why? Because you don't have enough resources to purchase enough machines so that you can do voter registration at once.
Just quickly, you spoke about the strategic plan of the Electoral Commission. And in that very strategic plan, the Commission made provision for externalities. And one of the externalities, that many people talked about had to do with the census and whether or not things would come out from the census, that Parliament at the end of the day would have to, enact bills and they become into law, and other things would come through Parliament. And if they go through Parliament, it's legally binding for NEC to just, implement, because they have, that is saying they are following legal procedures. So is that not the case here?
Samuel, state institutions are supposed to, gain the trust and confidence of the people that they were created for. We all saw the controversies surrounding the midterm census, even when it comes to Parliament. We all saw the chaos at Bintumani, wherein pepper sprays were even used during that day, MPs fighting one another. We all saw that. And we all saw how largely the population of this country rejected the midterm census. So to say, and they will also reject whatever outcome from that midterm census. So for you to link that to our elections process, we create more, problem and chaos, and that is what some of us are trying to avoid, especially us, the major political parties. We have raised these issues and will continue to raise them. Now, Leema mentioned something about, you know, they did census and they skewed the population, and NCRA came in, they provided the accurate data. First of all, you have to understand the difference between the census process and the civil registration process. Census process is something that happens within the period, you know, specific period of time. There is timeline. NCRA process is a continuous process. People register in and out, and NCRA captures people mainly that normally go to their offices or during the time that they did the voter registration exercise. That is when Leema and I was in government, so I understand exactly what I'm talking about because I know the process and I know what happened. And I know what happened. Of course, I mean,
when you were telling lies, you
don't interrupt me. Listen. Still, let me educate you on this because you don't know. You know, so you have to understand. So to say that census data will be the same as NCRA data, or because there is difference, so people skewed, no. It doesn't necessarily have to be so. And you have to also understand that census captures people, you know, who were in the country at that particular time. And movements do happen. So it doesn't mean because there are differences in data, so people skewed, you know. But our question is not the fact that, you know, they did census for development. No, it's the fact that, first of all, they forced the midterm census on us, even where we raised issue of constitutionality, even where we raised procedural issue, even where we raised technical issues, and we knew from the onset that their motive had nothing to do with development as they claimed. But, I mean, what we are seeing unfolding now, and we as political parties, we want to go into these elections peaceful, quiet, so that at the end of the day, the outcome will be accepted by the people of this country. If a census is rejected, the outcome definitely from that census will be rejected. And to say that NEC will use it for election, it will also be rejected.
All right, stay with us. Let me bring Saliu into the conversation. Good morning once again, Saliu.
Good morning.
Now, the All People's Congress are raising a concern. They've looked at the National Electoral Commission strategic plan, and the issue of boundary delimitation was put for 2024. And now they see, you know, the Electoral Commission saying if the government is ready for that, they would also be ready to do that. Now, these issues have come up several times, stemming from the census, as Sidi has explained. Now, are these concerns legitimate? Do we have something to worry about here?
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. The last boundary delimitation was done February 2017. And it's the responsibility of NEC, Electoral Commission for Sierra Leone, to review these boundaries at intervals. It could be 5 years at the lower limit and 7 years at the lower limit. So if we take it at the lower limit, it means February 2022 is 5 years since the last, boundary limitation was done. So therefore, the next boundary limitation by law should be 2023. And if you take it at the upper limit, it should be 2024. But whatever the case may be, our concern is that now already NEC has announced the date for voter registration, which starts September to October 2023. And for us, it will create a whole lot of problems if we decide to do voter registration first before coming back to do boundary limitation. Because from what we're hearing from the Electoral Commission, after the after the voter registration, voters will have known where they should go and vote during elections. And when you do boundary limitation after this exercise, there is bound to be a whole lot of problems because people must have been, relocated to somewhere else to vote because the boundaries will definitely change. And once the boundaries change, then that will pose a whole lot of problems. And we don't want to see a repeat of 2017 because a similar thing happened 2017. The boundary limitation report was, tabled before Parliament after the Provinces Act 2017 had been passed into law. And that act created new administrative boundaries. We saw the creation of a new province, districts and other localities. And when that happened, it created a whole lot of problems for the voters because some voters thought they were in District A, but after the process, they found themselves in another district. And even other voters, they were in this ward. When, after the processes, they found themselves in another ward. So it was difficult because for us at the National Election Watch, we also did follow-up engagement with the populace. And we asked a series of questions relating to how much the citizens or the voters know where they should actually vote. And quite a good number of them did not know at all. In fact, they did not even know the district they belong to after this whole process. So that's why we think whether we're going to have a boundary limitation or not, let's take all of these things into consideration. Already we have a schedule for voter registration. And once the voter registration is complete, then people will have known where they will go to and vote their centers and everything. And if after that exercise we embark on a boundary limitation, that will create a whole lot of problems altogether because boundaries will change. Other things will change that will affect the locations where people will actually vote. Then also, boundary limitation is not a one-off event. It involves a whole lot of engagement. It involves a whole lot of consultations, and it involves a whole lot of education. The people must know, the processes and how they should engage and how they should be part of the processes. So if you rush these processes, then you miss all of them altogether. So that's why we're saying we have to look at all of those. We shouldn't rush into this thing because we have a very tight schedule. I think I was here last week with somebody from the Electoral Commission for Sierra Leone, and we emphasized this schedule that we have, that this schedule is very tight. And if we have line-up activities, the moment we falter in any activity, that will eat into the other activity, and that will eventually affect even the dates that we've announced for the elections, June 2024.
Now, let me ask what News' position is on this. There was a lot of protest from the All People's Congress and international partners, the World Bank especially, when it comes to the census. Now, the question is, would any decision coming from or stemming from the data of that census be, acceptable?
Yeah, well, we will not give you a yes or no answer.
Except if somebody's lawless, that is the only reason.
Yes, we will not do that. But one thing we want to make clear is that
Leema, please wait your turn.
Yeah, right from the day the census was proclaimed, the midterm census was proclaimed, New came out with a press statement, raising concerns about, one, the timing. Because at that time we are in the midst of the corona pandemic, and we thought that was not the right time for us to embark on an exercise of that nature. And we also looked at the reasons profiled. We know, we agree, we do census to inform development initiatives in the country. And another reason that was profiled was that the report, the data that would be collected from this exercise would inform the implementation of the midterm National Development Plan. And for us at New at that time, we're saying, if the midterm National Development Plan from 2019 to 2023 or so, then the government too has a lifespan of 5 years. And if we're going to develop a data that will inform the implementation of a plan in its 5th year, then there is a problem. And we are saying that the process also did not have the involvement of a whole lot of citizens. Education at that time about the process was very, very low. The people did not know. It was a very important process. And if you want the process to be successful, it's a people-centered process. You go out and register people. If the people do not come out to register, or if the people do not participate, then certainly the process is bound to be mad with problems. So we raised all of these issues, and we did not only come out with press releases or come to the radio or television, we also met with key stakeholders like statistics to share our concerns with them. But the process went ahead. And we are waiting at NEW. We are waiting for the release of the midterm population census. Until that happens, we'll not comment further on that.
Will you, just quickly, Sally, will you fault the Electoral Commission? I'm asking this because the government is formed by a political party. And ultimately, the aim of the political party is to win elections, just like the opposition political parties. Will you fault NEC should statistics produce data that informs them for boundaries delimitation, especially when Parliament would have enacted that? Parliament would have given them a go-ahead, and it becomes law. Them not implementing that would be lawless on their part. Would you fault the Electoral Commission or for even saying they are now prepared should that happen?
Well, I don't think we'll fault NEC. What we're saying is that there are laws and principles for every activity. And according to the Constitution of Sierra Leone, it's the responsibility of the Electoral Commission for Sierra Leone to review the boundaries, the electoral boundaries of the country. And they should do that within intervals of 5 years or 7 years. And they cannot also do that unless the green light comes from Parliament. So if all of these things happen, and mind you also, to do boundary limitation does not only, hinge on the population census. There are so many factors that NEC should take into consideration before they go ahead and do it. But all what we are saying, now they have a schedule. Already they've announced the date for elections. They've also announced the dates for elections for permanent chief members of parliament in February. And they have May are the elections. Then June, we have the election, presidential and parliamentary election. So if we have that schedule that is set, so now we have the voter registration. Voter registration starts in September and ends in October. So if we decide to do, or they decide to do voter registration first, then after that, they do a boundary limitation. It means the whole process will be met with a lot of problems. And many people will find it difficult even to locate the areas where they will go to cast their vote. So that's why we're saying, whatever NEC is planning to do, let them take all of these things into consideration, that there are other processes they've already lined up. And the schedule is very, very tight. And the moment we falter in meeting the deadline of one schedule, will eat into the other, and that will eventually affect the date for the elections.
Stay there with us, Salyu, but let us also make something very clear to our audience that we invited the communications person from the Electoral Commission, and we are referred to the Western Region chairperson, commissioner, who said, of course, they are not commenting on this particular matter. So we reached out. But the issue of gerrymandering comes into play here, Leema. So the concerns from APC, from NEW, has to do with gerrymandering, how you want to skew things in your favor. Sidi is saying from the onset they knew that the census was not for development purposes. The purpose was for you, the SLPP, to have the figures, to ensure that you use the figures politically in your favor. And this is what is being demonstrated by this move.
That was what they wrongly did, and that is why they were voted out of power, because they never had the actual population that would have reflected the vote, the rigging pattern that they prepared, and that is why they were voted out of power. We are not doing that, because we are very sincere, and we are doing what is right for this country and what is good for the population of this country. Now, the issue about 2024 census is a proposal. And when you do proposal, it is possible that you do it exact the time you've slated, or you can do it before the time. But whatever it is, it should be within the circumference of the law. What the law prescribes is exactly what you should go by. In all of what they have said, they have not said that undertaking boundary delimitation is illegal. So in as much as it's not illegal, any attempt to even say do otherwise outside the law, in other words, you want to promote lawlessness, and that is really not good for a democratic society. Now, the other issue,
as much as it is legal, as Saliu has said, there are certain considerations that
that is where I'm coming.
Commission will have.
That's where I'm coming. The other issue of talking about after voter registration, then boundary delimitation follows, it's going to create a whole lot of problems. I am glad that he mentioned that NEC has to take consideration of all of those. But what also he failed to avert his mind to is the fact that after registration, there is always time for verification. Now, in the process of verification, let's say, for instance, they've done registration and later boundary delimitations follows. Now, at the end of the day, when those voter registrations are published, if it coincides that, or it happens that boundary delimitation has already gone, they would ensure that during the verification, wherever you fall, whatever constituencies or district or ward you find yourself, that is basically where you are going to verify, and NEC will take due consideration of the data of where you fall after the boundary delimitation during the verification process. And so that will be taken care of, and that is why all of these proposals are in next schedule. So to say the schedule is tight, you are telling us that the Constitution has not given us enough time space. But this is the constitutional requirement that has been used by the very APC themselves. This is the same provision the NEC is also using under this SLPP administration. We are not doing anything outside the law. It is within the law, and all of those concerns they've raised, I am very certain when those proposals were created, they took into consideration those unforeseen circumstances and made provision to address them once they arise. Now, with the issue of Sidi talking about they had raised issues with census and all, it is just because they have constituted themselves as a political organization that believes in lawlessness, misinformation, intimidation, and violence. And so they always lay the platform to justify violence. But what we know, this is a law-abiding country. I mean, this is a law country. Anybody that tends to beat the law, certainly the law will put you into structural adjustment to keep the peace. That is what we know. And we will not tell anybody to violate or abide by the law. But if you are a good citizen, certainly you have to abide by the law. But if you fail to abide by the law, and they will force you to comply. Samuel, let me just don't talk, perhaps for it to look like I'm talking in the air. Let me read precisely section 38, subsection 4 of this Constitution. Now, it's with your leave, I will read that. Or before that, let me just read one first. Section 38(1) says, Sierra Leone shall be divided in such constituencies for the purpose of electing member of parliament referred to in paragraph B of subsection 1 of section 74 of this Constitution, as the Electoral Commission, acting with the approval of Parliament, signified by resolution of Parliament, may prescribe. Now we come to 4. 4, it reads, so the Electoral Commission shall review the division of Sierra Leone into constituencies at an intervals not less than 5 and not more than 7 years, and may alter the constituencies in accordance with the provisions of this section to such extent as it may consider desirable in the light of the review. Now, of course, it goes further, but let me just stop within here, because what I'm talking about is really falls within here. So what, from what he said, because that was what I did not actually averted my mind to when I was coming here. to know when the last census was conducted. But thankfully enough, of course, he's giving us reference to that the last census was conducted in February 2017. So by February... Okay, boundary delimitation, yes, sorry. In February 2017. So which means that the 5 years interval has been reached, you understand? So if boundary delimitation is to take place anytime within 2023, it is still within the 5 years interval. So I have seen, of course that one is clear, they've said it, that it's not illegal. The only thing they have concerns, and those concerns I am very certain, NEC said that they are prepared if we have to do boundary delimitation. That's depending on what figures that census, the statistics will provide. So based on that, they have said they are prepared because it is within their own activities that they have proposed for the electoral period.
Is the SLPP as a political party and in power trying to use these institutions to actually secure and sustain power? Because I asked this question the last time I had Dr. Bright here. Dr. Bright said you've captured all of these democratic institutions as a political party. But we'll come to you before responding to this particular question. It's 9:15. Let's quickly go for commercial break and we'll be right back. Welcome back
to Wake Up Sierra Leone. Don't forget to send your messages to our Facebook page, AYV Sierra Leone. We'll take them shortly. Right.
So Leema, I was asking a question about whether you're using state institutions to continue to stay in power, because the NGC chairman accused you that you're capturing all of these institutions in your favor and no democratic institution functions in this country anymore under your party.
That is his view. Those institutions are created by an act of parliament. They are statutory bodies. And when government comes, government has a prescribed document on which it works. That's the Constitution and other laws, other legislations. So, of course, he's an opposition member. If government goes against, if government takes any step that is outside the law, he has the right to come with that to the public or go to court. That is why you, the media, you are there to keep us in check. And there is a provision for that in somewhere in the Constitution anyway, to keep us in check, to work within the framework of the law. So we are not just there by chance, or we are not just there as freelance government, but we are guided by law, we are guided by public policies. So to say we have captured all state institutions is for the right reasons and for the good of this country. And that shows that we are doing what is right as prescribed by law.
If I could just interject, there are several times wherein the government has made decisions and the question of legality has come up. For instance, how the census came about, the laying of the paper in parliament, that's one thing. The removal of the Auditor General, for instance, So there is always a question of legality.
All of those issues we are talking about here, they are mere opinions of those individuals of the law. But nobody has ever taken the steps to go to the court for interpretation. So, in as much I have the right to give my opinion on what I feel about the law, someone has the right to give his opinion on how he sees the law. So the duties and functions of the rightful institutions to interpret this Constitution and other legislations is the court. So much as people have given their opinion on the laws and stuff, have they taken the time to really go to the court to put those questions to the court to get ruling around those things? So that has never happened. And the issue about Auditor General for certain, I think she was not dismissed. Now, the president has rights under this Constitution to hire and fire. And this Constitution also make provision that certain activities, or in fact, activities of the president cannot be inquired into. It is in this Constitution. So, so for the Auditor General perhaps to misstep, you understand, or to go on procedural, and she was suspended and subjected to investigation. That is the right thing under the circumstance any responsible leader or government can do. So I am not saying we are Mr. Perfect or we are government perfect. No, we're bound to make mistakes. But that is why you guys are there to put us in check. That is why Parliament is there to put us in check. That is why other institutions are also given the right under this Constitution to put us in check by going through the legal means, going through the legitimate means, go to court, come to the media, raise issues, If your view is not heard by public opinion, you go to court to try the issues. So as far as I'm concerned, we are not freelance, we are guided by law, and that is why they have said democracy and the rule of law work side by side. So as far as I'm concerned, if they are of the view that we have captured state institutions, then it means we are a government that have fully established ourselves, that we are in charge to do the right thing for this country and to even think right for the oppositions themselves. Because you know what? President Bio used to say that they are not good for themselves, nor are they good for this country. So for certain, whatever they would think that is outside the law, they are basically not thinking right for this country. So we have to think for them. That's why we are the hem of affairs.
All right. I mean, just before we bring in our audience, Sidi, so you're crying foul. Is it that you're only crying foul now as a political party, knowing fully or having experienced the problems or the disadvantages, I mean, things like this come with when, say, for example, in 2017, are you going by the experience you had in 2017 that the SLPP is just going to do same to just keep themselves?
No, in the first place, the boundary delimitation in 2017 was based on several factors, not only the 2015 midterm and population housing census that took place. And so that is not the issue. And that is why when I heard Leema quoting from the Constitution, I think he's building his case on the wrong premise, because we have never challenged the fact that the Constitution makes provision for boundary delimitation either at lower or upper limit. What we have concern with is the fact that NEC wants to focus on using whatever data statistics Raleigh may produce from their so-called midterm census, you know, which we have challenged from the onset, which we know, you know, lacked the credibility and technical, you know, proficiency for it to have even been carried out. So for you to now suggest that we are ready, if you ask us to do this, at a time when you have already put out your electoral calendar, told us where we are to register and vote, I think, you know, like Saliu stated, will create so many problems, so many mistrust, and at the end of the day, it will be chaotic, which is what we are trying to avoid.
It will always.
So,
it will always
in terms of being lawless, you know, it is very clear from the onset the amount of missteps that we have seen, the amount of constitutional abuses. You know, I get worried, you know, when I hear, you know, state personalities like Leema here asking questions at, oh, people have never challenged, you know, some of these things, you know, for people have never gone for interpretation. Go to the Supreme Court and ask for the many cases that are there for constitutional interpretation, including even the one that has to do with the Auditor General, which, you know, you just talked about here.
Interpreted the few you've taken there.
You know, the case was adjourned for constitutional interpretation, if you don't know that. You know, so we need to start paying attention as state personalities. When you exhibit such lack of knowledge, it's worrisome. You know, and then you come here
about knowledge, because all you're talking here is not making sense to anybody.
And talk about lawlessness, when in fact, as far as I am concerned, the only reason why this country is peaceful and quiet is because opposition parties have remained lawful. If we have been lawless the way the government is, trust me, we will not have had peace in this country.
Continue to remain lawful.
You know,
that is good for this country.
But we respect the Constitution.
I will encourage you to continue.
At this point, I know you've raised many concerns about the operations of the Electoral Commission. At this point, do you trust the Commission to actually undertake, I mean, credible and fair elections that you would, I mean, accept at the end of the day? I
mean, we want to work with the Electoral Commission to ensure that we continue to build trust and credibility within the Commission. Don't get us wrong. They've done certain things that are good. And over the years, you've had people that have worked in that commission with high level of integrity, credibility, and have earned the trust and respect of the people of this country. As much as they've had challenges, but they've also done great things. Even under the current Chief Electoral Commissioner, we've seen the strides that they have made. We've seen the strides that some of the past commissioners made when they were in that commission. And so, as citizens, it is our responsibility to ensure that we support state institutions like those to continue to build the trust and confidence of the people of this country. So when we see them trying to go off because they want to please the government, you know, and that is where we come in, because their responsibility is not to government. Their responsibility is to the people of this country. And that is the difference we continue to see under this administration. Dr. Bright is right. They have captured all of these institutions, and they have been very, very, very manipulative in the way they deal with this institution, to the point that they have turned these institutions against the people of this country. Wow. And that is the problem. That is why you see today they can just arrest opposition members, they can just arrest citizens in that and in whatever manner. People are not allowed to express themselves freely or to associate freely.
So you are not free when you are talking?
You made me spend 2 nights
when you talk within the law, nobody has to
for simply stating that we'll mobilize the people of this country to kick you out of power. Something that is inevitable.
That is simple.
Something that is bound to happen.
Okay, organize your party.
And I'll continue to say that it is bound to happen, and it is going to happen.
Stay with us.
Organize your party first before you say that.
Hold on there.
So you do all of these and you come here and talk about lawlessness.
Organize your party first.
All right, gentlemen, stay with us.
Before you come to talk about
all right, please send your messages to our Facebook page, ask your questions or make comments on the issue we're discussing. Sally, you stay with us in our studio too. Still continuing the conversation here this morning about the parliamentary by-elections which are meant to happen in constituency 073 in Putloko
and Kailam.
Right. We have in the studio Sidi Tunis, the Publicity Secretary for All People's Congress, retired Lieutenant Lahai Lawrence Leema from the SLPP, and Saliu Kamara from the National Elections Watch.
But just before we take messages, Saliu, just quickly, where would the, if at all, NEC implements the boundaries delimitation, where would that put the credibility of the 2023 elections?
Well, it's not the process itself. It's not the conduct of the boundary delimitation. I think how they went about doing it will actually, give rise to credibility or not having credibility in the process. But at this stage, it's too early, actually, for us at the National Elections Watch to talk about credibility. Because in the first place, we are still waiting for Statistics Sierra Leone to release the provisional figures from the midterm census, and we also still are waiting the final, the final figures from the midterm census. When you have all of that, and if you look at the statement of the Electoral Commission for Sierra Leone, they are saying, they are not categorically saying that we're going to do this. He's saying that because right from the beginning, they are always saying that we're going to do boundary limitation if the need arises. So we're still waiting for this need.
Do we have a need at this point?
Of course.
Well,
based on your estimation as new, do we have a need at this point?
We are only concerned about the schedule. We don't want to put the cart before the horse.
So are you saying there's no need at this point for boundaries?
I'm not saying categorically that there is no need.
So what are you saying?
I don't know.
Is new not making or taking a position on this?
No, it's not about taking position. It's not about taking position. There are factors that will trigger boundary delimitation, and we are still waiting for that, because the Electoral Commission only says if the need arises, we'll do this. If we are asked to do this, we'll do this. So we are waiting until that time comes. They will analyze all the factors that NEC will put before us, and that will help us to take a position. But as it is, we are waiting to see whether it's going to take place. But at the moment, our concern is the fact that we've already established schedule for some electoral processes or events. And we don't want anything to come in that will actually interrupt with that, especially if you have a voter registration schedule. And the moment you complete the voter registration, and if you come back to do a boundary limitation, there are, a lot of problems that will arise. So we are concerned about that. At this stage, we're not concerned about the credibility of the process, because we cannot talk about credibility when the process itself has not yet started. When the process starts, we are observers. We observe all these processes. And based on our observation of these processes, then we can come together, look at all the dynamics that actually happen during those processes, then we take a position. And I think that's what we've been doing all along. When something happens, we observe. But in this case, we are only observing what is happening, but the process itself has not started yet. But when it starts, then we're going to do the same. We're going to observe, we're going to raise concerns, and we're going to engage those that we need to engage to make sure that, because that's why we exist.
So why are you raising concerns at this point?
Because you talk about credibility. Every electoral process we're talking about, we exist because we want these things to be inclusive. People participate because they are people-centered processes. So that's why we engage quite a lot. We observe a lot. And when we observe, we don't keep our findings to ourselves. Whenever we observe and see something, we don't even wait until the process is complete. We engage straight away that this is what we observe, this is what we've seen, and this is our recommendation to make sure that we move along.
What have you observed now?
Well, just in this room, I've observed two gentlemen. One from the SLPP, one from the APC, talking about this. The issues about
the boundaries delimitation.
Not yet. Because only right from the beginning, the Electoral Commission for Sierra Leone is telling us that if the need arises, they will conduct, a boundary limitation. So we don't know yet whether that will take place. But when that happens, they will observe the process, and then we'll come up with a position. But for now, our concern is the fact that we already have scheduled certain critical activities that make up the electoral processes. So whatever decision Electoral Commission is going to take, let them take all of those things into consideration before they take a decision on whether to do a boundary limitation or to rely what we already have. But for now, we're not going to say this is our position on it.
All right. Thank you very much, Saliu. I'm just a little bit confused, but if I'm sure I might be reading you wrong. Correct me if I am. So what Saliu is saying, there are factors that should trigger boundaries delimitation, but they've not seen those factors. So which means the need is not set here.
No, those factors are there. One of those factors is the law. If the law requires, like I just read, the law requires for us to do census at an interval of 5 years or 7 years, which I've just read, you are not listening.
Census?
I'm telling you, listen, let me talk. I've just read the law here, section 38, 1 and 4. That is talking about the conduct of, yes, that one is requiring us to do boundary delimitation. And what triggers boundary delimitation is the shift in population. And so when, of course, statistics has conducted the census. So whatever result they will bring, if there is shift in the population, there is increase in the population that will cause certain, because there has to be certain number, you understand, that makes up a constituency. And if that number exceeds that constituency limit that is required to create another new constituencies, it requires for a boundary shift, for creating or delimiting boundaries. If the population drops to such extent that it requires to close that particular constituencies, it all depends on what the work statistics is doing on the census. So now they have conducted the census, and once they are able to produce the result and send the results to Parliament, and Parliament sees the need that they require more seats in Parliament to be filled, then that, once it is legislated, will be passed to NEC, and NEC will now see the need to create those boundaries or to close some of those boundaries depending on how the population shift will actually go. So the first point where we started, they've done the census. And we're saying that we're still within the time limit for conducting boundary delimitation. So depending on what results census is bringing and when Parliament legislates that, it will depend also if NEC is to go ahead with boundary delimitation or not. That was why NEC was very much careful in their language, in the use of language, that we are prepared for boundary delimitation as much as the need arises. So let's wait and see what statistics has for us. And once that is sent to Parliament, let's see what Parliament will do and also requirements Parliament will bring. And that will inform the decision of NEC to go and do boundary delimitation or not.
Can we get some messages from our Facebook page?
Yes, just before getting those messages, Antonia. So, Sidi, at this point, with all of these concerns you've raised, if at all, I mean, the issue of boundaries delimitation is legislated by Parliament, NEC has to go on with it, what would be the position of the APC?
Is to abide.
I mean, Samuel, boundary delimitation is not something you do in 1 or 2 months. It involves processes. And those processes take time. And like I stated earlier, it will be chaotic, or it will be, unfortunate if NEC, engages into any activity that may even suggest to skew the current electoral calendar. To skew the current electoral calendar. That is one aspect of it. And it will also be even more unfortunate for NEC to engage in any activity that will increase the level of anxiety and mistrust the people of Sierra Leone already has in some of these state institutions. And that is why us as stakeholders, as far as it relates to governance and elections in this country, we are raising these concerns. We are doing everything we could to ensure that NEC stays away from this idea of boundary delimitation, especially where we are all now geared up for elections in this country. What, I will restate here categorically that as far as we are concerned, whatever data that will come out of Statistics Sierra Leone, as far as it relates to the midterm census, it's not something that we see as credible, and as a result will not be acceptable. So for you to use that as a basis for even do boundary delimitation in itself is something that we will not accept.
The only thing I would want to encourage Sidi and his party to continue to do, like he said, they have always been lawful and law-abiding. I will encourage them to continue to do that. But I want to let him know also that he has always laid the foundation for them to justify to this nation that they will jump into violence. And also, of course, I would also let him know, I will remind him that as a state, as a government, we are responsible to ensure that those citizens who decide not to comply with the laws of this country will be forced to comply. And nobody will be above the state or the laws of this country. And
also know that the people of this country, including us in opposition, know our rights.
Certainly.
I will continue to exercise our rights, and nobody will stop us from doing that. No amount of threat will stop us from doing that.
You just keep within the framework of the law.
And you think you can overuse your power to silence people. It is not going to happen.
Thank you very much,
we have the
gentlemen.
Freedom of Information Act. Of course, to your credit, to talk whatever you want to talk within the confines of the law.
Let's not go back and forth. Thank you very much for talking to us this morning. That's all we have time for this topic. Thank you so much to Salio in our studio too, and to Sidi, Tunis, and Lahailo and Leema for talking to us this